Welcome into this week's edition of the Climate Friday newsletter. Meteorologist Jon Burchfield here. Thanks for tuning in, whether it's online on WTOL.com or on our YouTube channel. Good to have you with us, and hard to believe we're already rounding the corner into the latter half of October. We're seeing the fall colors, but one of the trends we have not seen is our first frost of the season, and that is something that is very characteristic of the month of October, and we're a little late to the party this year as far as that frost goes, and we are going to be looking ahead towards that first freeze as well. That'll inevitably happen within the next weeks to the next month. So we're going to break down the data. When do we normally see our first frost and freeze? And also, what can you expect as we head towards the final days of October and beyond? So what do we define as a frost? Typically, the number for a frost is 36 degrees, and that is something that has remained elusive so far this year. Once we do dip down to those mid to upper 30s, that is when it is recommended that you cover up sensitive plants for any hopes of salvaging them, especially as you get down to the lower 30s. Now, our normal first frost is actually October 6th, so in a typical year, we would have already seen it by now. However, this year we're a little bit slow going with an overall milder than normal start to October, and that is for the Toledo metro. Those of you that live along the lakeshore, it tends to stay a little milder at night, so the first frost happens later. And if you live northwest of Toledo, say Hillsdale and Lenawee counties, a little bit earlier where the temperatures are colder. Now, believe it or not, our coldest temperature this season hasn't even dipped down to the 30s. We've dropped to 41 several occasions, including October 8th, the 17th, and the 18th, but that is so far our coldest of the season. However, in the forecast, we are looking ahead to some much cooler days. Frost is looking likely into Monday morning, temperatures dropping down to the 30s, and that'll be our first frost of the autumn season, several weeks behind schedule, but an inevitable consequence as we head towards the latter half of October. Again, along the lakeshore, it's going to stay a little milder in the 40s. However, mid-30s are likely in the Toledo metro, and further inland, that includes southern Michigan, and even our southwestern counties like Putnam are going to see those chilly feeling temperatures. As I mentioned earlier, 36 is usually that red flag for outdoor plants and flowers that you want to salvage. 40 degrees is usually okay, and that's why we haven't seen any widespread problems, but 36, usually the level that you start to experience widespread frost. Now, of course, it does vary from year to year, and there's some anomalies on both sides of the spectrum, from extremely early frosts to unusually late ones. Even during the month of August, it can happen. If we look back to 1982 in the weather record books, August 29th, that was the earliest first frost ever recorded. Can you imagine the month of August and already starting to see frost? Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you can have some years where you go all of October without any frosty conditions. We are certainly on that path right now, but we are likely to see a frost before the month's end. November 3rd is the latest that we've seen a first frost, and that was way back in the 19th century, 1897, and that is the latest first frost on record. So that's frost. What about freeze? Well, we differentiate those two based on the temperature of 36 for frost and 32 for freeze. That freezing temperature, or 0 degrees Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit. September 14th is the earliest, back in 1975. So if you think about already mid-September, imagine seeing 32-degree temperatures. The latest that we've seen it is the middle of November, November 15th. That was in 1915. In other words, we've never gone past the second week of November without seeing freezing conditions. So we are expecting that first frost as we start off next work week. As far as a freeze is concerned, it's going to be a little bit dicey for the Toledo metro. I think we're going to stay above 32, at least for Lucas County. However, there is the chance that some folks in southwestern Michigan do get awfully close to that number. Our normal first freeze typically happens in the latter half of October in the Toledo metro. Now, due to that marine layer or the lakeshore region on those warmer waters of Lake Erie, some parts of Erie, Huron, Ottawa counties don't see that until even the start of November. And northwest of Toledo, early October freeze is common in Lenawee and Hillsdale counties, where that normal first freeze happens a little bit sooner than the rest of the area. Just for fun, October snowfall? Yes, it has happened before. No, we're not expecting any in the forecast, but back in 1989, that was the snowiest October on record, where we got 2 inches of accumulation. Still a little bit too early for many folks, as we're just trying to savor the fall season, but it has happened before. Not looking likely this year, as our precipitation going to be in the liquid variety in terms of rainfall. So what about climate change and the link to frost and freeze in the fall? Well, in general, frost and freeze are actually happening a little bit later year, and that is due to the fall warming trend. Most cities across the United States have experienced more freeze-free days, in other words, days with temperatures above 32, and over the course of the calendar year, that number is increased by 15. So that's almost 2 full weeks without a freeze due to climate change and that extended growing season or warmer weather continuing into fall. We've seen that longer growing season, and one of the consequences of that has been an extended allergy season, and that's particularly evident with those allergens that normally die off with the freeze. Those are lasting a little longer into the fall season. So folks who suffer allergies, especially the ragweed allergy season, that's something that's gotten a little worse in the recent years and decades, and that has grown the most. When you have an extra 15 days to work with, that can mean a 2-week extension of the allergy season into fall, and that may be something that you have noticed. Growing season is another way that we describe that, or how many days we go without a freeze. Area farmers very familiar with that, and overall we've seen a rapid uptick since the 1970s to the 2010s in the number of days without a freeze. As the growing season continues to get longer, that upward trajectory is very evident, even though there is some year-to-year variation that you can see on both sides of that bar. This white line here shows you the overall uptick in a later fall frost, and that leads to a longer allergy season. Now, the Toledo Metro is actually even more impacted by climate change. I talked about how 15 days is the national average. Well, that's the cumulative average of a study of over 200 cities, but Toledo in particular has seen almost double that in terms of the increase in growing days and the increase in days without a freeze. So something you can expect going forward into the future is those fall allergies may extend just a little bit further. We are still awaiting that first frost of the year, likely to happen this week. If you're watching this on Friday on YouTube on WTOL 11+, we'll have the latest weekend outlook and a look ahead at those Monday morning temperatures. And you can always stay tuned to the WTOL 11 weather team, follow along on social media, and subscribe to the Climate Friday newsletter. You can find that at WTOL.com/email. Links right there. We'll see you next week with the latest.